So, when I first started writing this show, I used to break my outlines down into 4 sections: arts and culture, tech/AI, trans news, and the fascism roundup. I'm sure you can see several issues with that idea. I'm the only writer and anchor, so there's less need to make it clear what voice or perspective I'm speaking from. A basic grasp of intersectionality can tell you that those topics overlap heavily all the time, and they do tend to bias towards rather unpleasant news, so there's just not always that much good news using that format in 2025 USA. There's a reason why I tagline this show comedic as possible. I think something changed the week Charlie Kirk was shot. I could still make jokes, but it got just a lot harder to let myself do something like review Nerds Candy Corn or spend time talking about the Netflix Dragonvore anime when right-wingers were shooting each other and the collective media establishment were trying to find a way to blame it all on a trans girl while also refusing to label her as such. That lackadaisy energy may never return. I couldn't even bring it fully to bear for the first spun-off episode of Pet Play, but I want you to know that I'm at least still chasing it. While this week was capped by the President of the United States throwing another nodding party after asking the Supreme Court to free him from the onerous duty of not starving 42 million people, so as to better maintain their position as hostages in the faux negotiation with Democrats who found exactly enough spine to defend the Affordable Care Act subsidies, or at least pretend so, without which every USian will likely see their healthcare costs increase, some by thousands of percent as a direct result, whereas others will only see their healthcare costs increase because of the ripple effect outward. While the walking fossil Chuck Schumer and Michael No Fucking Policy Bennett claim a pinky promise from the GOP to vote on the subsidies in December after open enrollment ends would somehow be a worthwhile victory for Democrats and the American people. While the second Trump government shutdown became the longest in US history, eclipsing the first Trump government shutdown. While masked marauders kidnap and torture our friends and neighbors, while Visa, MasterCard, Stripe, and PayPal refuse to allow the purchases of queer art and expression, and yes, even porn, while funneling billions into regurgitative AI porn ads for things that are not porn, communities and individuals the nation and world over continue stepping up, doing what they can. State and local governments declared states of emergency or took similar measures to get money and food to SNAP beneficiaries and food banks, while the President of the United States actively denied them that. At least 11 states managed to push benefits to SNAP before the appeals to the Supreme Court pausing them. Ice Watcher and Ice Whistler groups continue to spread as communities learn how best to protect themselves from the secret police. Even Autumn Wolf, whose misfortunes at the Canadian border I reported on last week, has found housing and set up the Trans Meal Fund in an effort to give back to the same community that saved her. That is not to say some trite aphorism, it's always darkest before the dawn or the like, but to say something I've said in so many ways on this show. Hope is the feeling that things not only can or should get better, but that we can play a role in making things better, that we are not powerless to our own fates. Without that kernel of agency and, very pointedly, the will to step towards that hope for reality, it's just faith. Faith that others will take the necessary steps. Many of you just had that faith in Democrats shattered, and I'm sorry. It happened for me, and many like me a long time ago, but I am still here. Don't let this break you. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Let it radicalize you to hope and work for the better world their philosophy denies is possible. And yes, this is a cow onesie. To pull back the curtain a little bit, I generally try to dress with a specific air for this show, which I'll call professionally cunty dyke. It has an element of more professional dress, artfully and intentionally disheveled to appeal to a specific variety of sapphic, and because I like the way it makes me look and feel. Today, I needed to not scream, so my choices were embrace spectacle and wear something ridiculous but that I find deeply comforting, or do this high as hell. It's 9 a.m. My script says 8 a.m. because my internet was down for an hour, so that was fun. But either way, I'm trying for the comfortable clothes so that I don't have to read this high. And welcome to Muttday Morning News. I'm the titular Mutt Fen. Now let's get to some news. And let's be honest, what is a mutt but a chimera by any other name? Well, since you didn't run screaming or weeping after that cold open / monologue, let's see if I can give you some positive news first. In case we've all forgotten, since Tuesday, the Democrats swept nearly every election Tuesday night, as voters overwhelmingly rejected Trump. The biggest deal was, obviously, Mamdani sweeping the New York mayoral elections as the city's first Asian, Muslim, and socialist mayor, and proving the centrist cowards' argument wrong yet again before they were centrist cowards again, winning by 8.8% as per last count I could find from November 5th. We'll get to a few of the other elections, but I have some numbers I want to run by y'all first. Maybe try and remember them in conjunction with Mamdani's platforming of trans, queer, and marginalized people and our issues. I think it might help explain why every newspaper in the damn country has put out a story on why Mamdani's victory has absolutely nothing to do with those marginalized voices, but rather how he inspired people with his economic platforms, usually while then deriding them as impossible. 14% of New Yorkers identified as some flavor of queer at their exit polls on Tuesday. That's just shy of 1 in 6 voters. And fun fact, that's only expected to increase as the back half of Gen Z reach voting age. And while New York is obviously on the higher end density queer-wise, exit polls in many states, if they ask, often look pretty similar. Turns out, being marginalized rather increases one's likelihood of voting, especially if there is an option for us that isn't red concentration camp or blue concentration camp, but where our families still get to go out for brunch. Exit polls out of New York showed among non-queer voters, Mamdani won 46% of the vote. Cuomo won 45%, and Silwa snatched up 8%, leaving a single percentage point for the remaining 5 doofuses on the ballot to scrabble over. Of that 14% of all voters in New York who voted, it's specifically those who took part in this vote, 82% of those queers voted for Mamdani. That is, quite literally, 11.48% of the total voting population of New York. Again, Mamdani won by 8.8%. The trans puppy girls, the carabiner dykes, the leather daddies, and someone's bisexual grandma fucking decided the New York City elections, bitches. Want to know something else fun about those voter numbers? Well, netting 82% of the gays won Mamdani the election. Cuomo did net 70% of one demographic, and it didn't matter. 2024 Trump voters. He even beat out the actual Republican Curtis Silwa there, as he only netted 21%. But then, he didn't have Trump's actual endorsement like Cuomo. Sex pests gotta stick together, apparently. Abigail Spanberg's Virginia gubernatorial victory over winsome Earl Sears, strangely enough, is being attributed to her pro-trans stance, despite really not having voiced all that strongly of one. Were I a cynical mutt, I might say it had something to do with the Democratic establishment's preference to highlight Sandberg's quiet support over Mamdani, who actively cited Sylvia Rivera as an inspiration and educated New Yorkers on the long history of trans activists. But Virginia also didn't seem to have a gay, bi, trans question on their exit polls, so I can't necessarily back that one up with the numbers. I will, however, say the Virginia exit polls do not make men look good. Before I show these numbers, understand that a lot of federal employees who've been furloughed or fired as part of the theoretically still ongoing, because the House hasn't actually approved this new utterly bullshit Senate budget, and Mike Johnson is still hiding from Adelita Gravalva, so we'll see about that. What was I saying? Oh, right, the federal employees who have been furloughed or fired as part of that whole thing do not usually live in D.C., but the surrounding states, commonly Virginia. I think you can guess where those folks are going to vote. But I want you to remember everyone around them. All the people seeing their friends and neighbors going without pay at best, out on their ears at worst, and yet somehow 51% of the men voted for the pro-Trump Republican. I know that sounds silly to bring up. Why is it a big deal? Men are split evenly down the board. Isn't that ideal? No, because there's no such thing as an ideal outcome for a poll in a purely democratic sense. But let me demonstrate it this way. 1 in 2 Virginia men who voted did so for a candidate with so little in the way of policy or wit, she couldn't come up with anything but transphobic attack ads when her opponent used to be in the fucking CIA. Think about it this way. Assume for a second you're a dude in Virginia and you're watching my show, so I'm going to assume that you'd be in that 49% side. Actually, given I know my audience leans a little under 30, I'll give you extra credit and say the 56% side. So you, a dude in Virginia, now pop another dude into existence for this thought experiment. We need know nothing about him except that he voted for the Republican in that circumstance. One of you has made a choice that makes you a clear and present danger to my safety as a trans woman. How do I tell at a glance which one of you two is not safe? I obviously can't. And when the chance I'm wrong is literally 1 in 2, it's often a lot safer to not interact. What I'm trying to say is, when women talk about picking the dude or the bear, remember it's not necessarily an indictment on you, but statistically, it is of someone you know. You know what you can do, though? Because there's actually something, and it's really easy. You don't need to get angry when you see or hear a friend doing something shitty, or stop to educate every person who says lame that it's a normalized ableist slur the same way people said things were bad by calling them gay in the 90s and aughts. You don't need to get into the weeds about how the vile breeding-based misogyny of bitch has become normalized as the only femme-coded insult, and let's be honest here, a slur specifically about women. All you have to do is the next time you see a friend doing something shitty, is tell him, dude, that was shitty, and you shouldn't have done it. Heck, you can even just do, dude, that was shitty. That's it. Declarative statement, and you're good. I don't think folks take into account just how important it is that you can set expectations of the people in your life if you communicate them. And dude, that was shitty? Does that. No ultimatum, no big discussion, just 4 words that declare, hey, don't do that again. I, your friend, didn't like it. I, your friend, have implied you should have known it was shitty. It would be a bigger deal if you do the thing again after being called out for it. And most importantly, by not making a big deal out of the comment, you imply that your friendship is otherwise unchanged because this is a normal part of human interactions. Why, yes, I did just use a news story on Virginia voter polling to try and get men to realize we want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Also, to see why it can be difficult, in fact, dangerous to do so in many cases, all while trying to give them an easy way to alleviate that exact problem. And yes, it did get really autistic trans girl who learned how to socialize through child acting at the end there. I can't do math, but I can read social cues like a protocol droid, largely as a result of saying things like, I can read social cues like a protocol droid while wearing a cow onesie. A couple of quickfire ones now. Prop 50, the California redistricting bill in response to multiple red states' threats to redraw electoral lines to depreciate non-Republican voters, passed as was rather expected. In my lovely state of Colorado, we actually had two big initiatives pass, Prop LL and Prop MM. LL continues the Healthy School Meals for All program for 3 years by merely retaining $486 more in taxes annually from only Coloradans who make more than $300,000 a year. Again, this is funding the Healthy School Meals for All program for 3 years merely by taking an additional less than $500 only from households making more than $300,000. Prop MM did the exact same thing, except by taking the same amount again from those same people, and doing so enabled the program to actually expand to its maximum capacity, providing breakfast and lunch to all Colorado public school children, K through 12, for the next 3 years, with any overflow, of which there is actually expected to be some, set to pay into SNAP. And yeah, we're getting to that now. I nodding called it when I said giving Trump the option to either pay full SNAP benefits on Monday or partial ones on Wednesday was going to bite the judge in the ass. I get the logic. It's very centrist. Surely, if you provide him with a middle ground, he'll take that and be happy with it. I wish I knew how to say irony in Polish. Yeah, obviously, Trump said he'd do the partials on Wednesday the 5th, while still posting stuff like this to Truth Social. He appealed the order to pay SNAP, which, let me again stress, he appealed the order to give money to pay for food for starving Americans. It's not a question of whether the money existed or was there or anything of that. It was whether he could be obliged to feed Americans. This isn't even like USAID, which Trump had Elon Musk and Doge run roughshod through earlier this year. The foreign aid agency's closure is projected to cause millions of deaths. In fact, it's already caused thousands of deaths. But Trump can excuse them under his America First rhetoric, because it's not Americans that are suffering. It's just the colonial powers dependent upon the largesse of empire. That doesn't work when he's fighting tooth and nail to starve his own people. Long story short, on November 4th, the USDA filed a memo to states to issue SNAP benefits at 50% the next day, followed by another memo raising that maximum to 65% on the 5th, before a final one on the 7th announced that full issuances were available per a court order from the Rhode Island judge. 11 states, not even just blue ones, California, Oregon, Washington, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Illinois, Kentucky, Louisiana, North Dakota, and Kansas had processed SNAP benefits before the administration appealed that ruling to the District Supreme Court Judge Jackson on Friday night. Judge Jackson was placed into the deeply unenvious position of either agree with the lower court and watch the administration immediately appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, likely seeing that they would have 5 votes, still staying the order and allowing the case to continue in a lower court, or grant the 48-hour stay herself and try to put the Supreme Court on a much tighter deadline. She went with the latter. To add injury to injury, on Sunday morning, after the stay was granted, the USDA sent out letters to states who'd followed the USDA's previous orders and issued SNAP benefits, demanding they illegally and apparently in a way that the system is actually just not able to do, claw them back. Also, just to throw it out there, I'm going to include this for sure, not saving this for the post show, but since the Democrats also fucking caved on the shutdown, that stay has also been removed. So if they had literally waited 8 hours, 8 fucking hours, full SNAP benefits would have still been exactly as available. And quite frankly, I don't believe for sure that Trump is going to issue full SNAP benefits because he shouldn't have been able to steal them away anyway. Okay, now we're getting to the really stupid part. The part of the show I fully expect to have mostly rewritten before tomorrow because it's about the Dems trying to reopen the government tonight as I wrote this bit. And I really hoped that they wouldn't do it. But since they hid which senators were actually going to be giving in until they'd already voted and no one could, call them, that hope was kind of dashed to faith based on that metaphor from the beginning, and then it just went downhill from there. For 2 pissing months. That's all they got, by the way. They have agreed to funding until January 2026, citing as victories a Trumpian promise to follow the law signed by the man himself the last time he tried to get out of paying government employees back pay for a government shutdown, then an illegal act itself, and a promise to vote on the ACA tax subsidies in December. A vote which Republicans would automatically outnumber, which is why the leverage of the government shutdown was the only thing Dems had. Assuming Republicans even bother to have the vote. And I don't know why on earth you'd believe that they do that. They lie constantly now. While the story is already being floated as 8 moderate Democrats caving, it's rather telling that they're all either retiring or not up for re-election until 2028. Also, one of them is Fetterman, who's only a Democrat in name and has voted in lockstep with Trump for years. Actually, fun fact, know how this rather suddenly came to a head when it was announced that flights would start getting cut across the nation on Friday? Of those 8 senators, who should be booted from the Democratic Party and made to serve the remainder of their terms as independents, because yes, you can actually require that folks maintain the party lines and have there be consequences for voting against party and Americans' interests. Well, of those 8, all but one, Fetterman, who again, just is a Republican, he just doesn't want to act like he is, all took money from the American Airlines PAC. What I mean by all that is that this was done in a way that offers plausible deniability to all but those 8 Democrats, who were both wallet deep with airlines and aggressively incentivized to vote in their favor, and politically safe or retiring for the next 4 years. Many behind the scenes were quietly, or in some cases quite openly, in on this 2-month poison pill of a deal, while getting to look like they oppose it. Schumer included, which is why he isn't on that list. Chuck Schumer really thinks the American people and Democratic voters in particular are so stupid, they'll literally vote blue no matter who, him or his chosen successor, after a month and a half of performative fighting. We all watched him give up. Neither of them are among the 8, but I promise you, both of the Colorado senators, despite anything they claim in the coming days, would have done it too, and were on board with the plan, provided they didn't have to sign their name to it. The same goes for politicking shitweasels like Adam Schiff of California, a man I have the odious displeasure of having met personally, and reinforce that, yeah, that's why I'm saying he was behind some amount of this. Which is why Bennett of Colorado, who was one of the first to propose giving up, believing Americans truly understood that Dems would fight for their healthcare, again, by giving up the fight for that healthcare, should be kept as far from the Colorado governorship as possible, as that's his next political ambition. The man has no policy. When asked on Monday, 2 weeks ago, how he was going to be voting on any of the ballot initiatives, he didn't know what they were. This man should be nowhere near Democratic seats of power. And Hickenlooper, who is up for re-election this year, should have his centrist ass primaried out of power. And don't worry, he has opponents in that primary already. I have a sneaking suspicion I'm going to end up a little bit more focused on Colorado issues in the next little while. It was too warm, sorry. And before I forget, along with promises to fund the government for a whole 2 months, which consequently came right when the Democratic senators were realizing their flights home for Thanksgiving might be affected, and an empty promise to hold a vote on the ACA tax subsidies without any leverage, the Dems agreed to a bunch of concessions as well, including recriminalizing hemp, which would make all CBD pain and nausea products illegal again. Note that I said CBD, not THC. This isn't even fun hemp they're recriminalizing, but meds, most often used to non-addictively alleviate chronic pains, as well as for those recovering from surgery and cancer treatments. Absolute ghouls, every single one of them. I know I've brought it up several times already, but seriously, support small creators, y'all. Unless we have a spouse with a W-2 job and health insurance, every US-based freelancer, YouTuber, TikToker, streamer, whatever, just saw their healthcare premiums raised thousands of dollars a month. Nearly every creative is having to decide rather suddenly whether we can afford to keep doing this, even if we're in perfect health. And most of us are in this because for one reason or another, we can't work in more traditional W-2 spaces. Do you have any idea how much easier my life would be if I had an office job? But you find a place that's, 1, hiring, and 2, willing to hire a trans woman in Trump's 2025 America. If you find this mythical place, go buy a lottery ticket. I keep having to add extra addendums to this bit because it just keeps getting worse. So, on top of Trump getting everything he wanted from Schumer, he also pushed an absurdly broad pardon that purports to hit every January 6th insurrectionist, as well as whole swaths of folks like Rudy Giuliani, who are still in court over their alleged 2020 election interference. 2 quick important details about that. 1, many of those, including Trump's own co-defendants in the Georgia election interference case, which he notably did not pardon himself from, have been found guilty under state law. The president cannot pardon those who broke state law, only federal. 2, in order to take a pardon, one must admit that they are guilty. It's why pardons didn't used to be offered up so freely as political favors, because while it does expunge the criminal charges, it carries with it the understanding that you did in fact commit the crime for which you were accused, and that the president at the time had some reason for pardoning it. Just some food for thought. Hey, to focus on something less stupid for at least a second. Maybe less painful. Less painful. Remember how inept this regime has been about trying to handle the pushback from white dudes? If not, well, I think you'll probably like to hear that sandwich throwing dude out of DC was found not guilty on Thursday. Would you have believed that one of the most important bits of testimony was that the Fed, one Gregory Larimore of Customs and Border Patrol, wouldn't you know, was outright lying during his testimony? He claimed to the jury that the sandwich exploded and he could smell onions and mustard. The video of him being hit with the sandwich was shown in court. It didn't even come unwrapped. If it hadn't just touched a Fed, it would have still been safe to eat. Actually, you know what? Since I already did that one incredibly autistic explanation of a social situation this episode, I'm going to do another. And this time, I have a very helpful visual provided by Sludge, aka Melangetic, over on Blue Sky. They were sharing 2-ish weeks ago. Just listen to the Gudra. I know you think being a bit rude or flippant to someone makes you endearing, like you're skipping to the comfortable friend step, but you're missing the build-up of learning what is and is not okay to be playful or rude about with someone when you do that. Without that build-up, it's just you being rude. That's why treat others the way you want to be treated isn't actually the golden rule, but a simple thing we teach children before they learn how to actually process empathy for others. It's still centering your desires as the baseline for someone else, not listening to their needs. Treat others the way they want to be treated by you. If you don't need this PSA, then I apologize for interrupting you. Please keep being awesome, but at least some of my YouTube commenters really need to hear this. I'll be honest, I might have gone looking for some more positive news this week. So I'll once again recommend a couple of news sources to keep up with, well, the horrors without necessarily catastrophizing. The Tribe are a Black-owned news site out of Chicago whose reporting has been biting throughout the invasion. Similar note, I'd also recommend the Chicago Block Club. All of these links will be down in the description. I recommend trying to keep abreast of what's been going on in Chicago, as the administration has been using Operation Midway Blitz as a test bed for strategies before applying them elsewhere, both enforcement and some of their legal strategies too, though legal strategy is a bit of a misnomer for the way this administration acts. I'd also recommend Caitlin Burns for fairly level-headed reporting, by which I do mean calling a spade, not everyone is equally right when one side is provably lying, as well as Marissa Kabasa, aka thehandbasket.co, for that, but with some real investigative chops. I mean, heck, she's suing the US government over the USAID case. This is not a story I wanted to cover or even really expected to. Teen Vogue, made famous over the last few years for its downright amazing reporting and honest coverage of trans, black, and women's issues, as well as their intersectionality, is no more. The publication's owners, Condé Nast, fired 6 writers Monday night, predominantly BIPOC and trans women. Reportedly, it has eliminated Teen Vogue's entire politics desk, writers and editorial, and the publication no longer has any trans women on staff. The in-house union, Condé United, and News Guild made a joint statement condemning the consolidation of Teen Vogue as what it plainly was: a political gutting of one of the most progressive and award-winning journalism desks in the country at a very politically motivated time. Additionally, when 4 union leaders from Bon Appetit, Wired, The New Yorker, and Condé Nast Entertainment went to confront the bosses about these sudden firings, they were illegally fired themselves. This one is still developing, so I don't have a ton else to say there, because that happened Thursday night, but we'll see. We really don't know where this is going, y'all. Okay, back on the whole, I'm trying to give you all some fairly positive stories to remind you that it doesn't all suck. I'm going to mention the Toxic Yuri bundle, Poisoned Lilies, probably every episode this month. I did full recommendations for both The Grafting of Persephone and Ranked Competitive Breast Growth over on the debut of my new show, Pet Play. Please check it out. But I haven't actually read a bunch of the other books in the bundle, so starting well, last night, so I haven't actually finished any yet. I'm going to make sure that I have at least one other book to recommend personally in all of these sections. Though I can say I'm starting with A Quiet Universe by K.F. Atkinson. It's been on my list for a while, and the sequel is also in the bundle. And since my last episode, the bundle has crossed its second goal of $3,000 and is well on the way to its new $7,000 goal. So please go enjoy some Toxic Yuri if you haven't, especially because, again, it's gonna help feed a whole bunch of trans girls who kind of need it now. In fact, I mentioned Autumn's Emergency Trans Meal Fund in beta at the top of the show, but I'd like to touch on it again and remind folks that little things like these small acts of mutual aid, or supporting a bunch of random trans girls' Patreons for $1 or $2 a month, or tipping folks on OnlyFans or Fansly, whatever, it goes a long way, and we're all trying to pay it forward. Autumn has a full description and a contact sheet in her public Patreon blog post about the new fund. I've linked it in the description below, but the basic idea is pretty straightforward, taking folks at their word, mutual aid sitch with Autumn able and committing to providing 2 meals per week to hungry trans folks in need of help. It's really that simple to get up and do something, y'all. How about 2 more stories of a generally positive bent, so I'm not a raging cow beast all day. First up, Magica Riot sequel Full Bloom has a release date, December 5th, and it's up for pre-order now. You can get the full list of places it's for sale at magicariot.com/fullbloom, but it really is pretty much everywhere books are sold, including bookshop.org, if you're looking for a physical copy that's not through big box stores like Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Fair warning, I will not be normal about this book because Magica Riot makes my brain happy. If you haven't read the first Magica Riot book, well, there's no time better than the present to give it a try. You can get it from Itch for $4 and experience what I can only describe as trans lesbian joy and an unabashed love of magical girl squad filtered through the razor wit of a writer who lives, breathes, and took part in the city planning of Portland, Oregon. I mentioned the city planning because, yeah, it does actually come up and there's some of the best lines. The sequel promises to be, quote, bigger, deeper, and gayer than the first. Yes, that is an actual quote from Carrie Buchanan. I fucking adore her. And don't you think I'm not seeing that polyamory adventure tag on the marketing blurb? My slutty polyam ass is so here for this. Consequently, yes, you can expect the review of Magica Riot Full Bloom to be part of Muttday Morning News on December 8th. Or potentially just the entire episode. We'll see. Final bit of, let's call it hopeful reporting? Bethany Karsten, better known as the Transfeminine Review, published her 2025 Starter Guide to Transfeminine Literature, and you should give it a look. No, really, go. I'm not going to pick it apart for you or anything like that. Beth has done such a good job summarizing or trying to pull individual recommendations would do it and her work a disservice. She's written recommendations for 78 transfemme written books, spread out across every genre, and even broken them down by how deep into the weeds of trans experience the book delves and the reader might want to make sure they're comfortable with beforehand, including, yes, some to get you warmed up. Actually, as an unhinged little goblin poet myself, I was really happy to see 2 poetry collections in this year's list, both of which I'm gonna hunt down once I'm done with today's show. The link to the 2025 Starter Guide is in the description, and you know what? So will be a link to my poetry project from Pride this year, because that wasn't a joke about being a weird little goblin poet. I did a whole series of poems based around the Fibonacci sequence for Pride this year. I even wrote a new one for my redesigned Twitch panels last week. I don't think anyone's noticed it yet, but hey. The dubious benefit of stuff happening during the edit that I can add in. Actually, one of these I forgot in the main scripted show. Namely, the Supreme Court has resoundingly rejected Kim Davis's attempt to end gay marriage. This isn't necessarily a great bit of news for, well, gay marriage, because Kim Davis's case has always been built on sand and vapor, so this seems more like a, we won't hear it because we know how it's going to play out, at least if we stick to the actual law, but we'll see. The less positive one is that literally 20 minutes ago at time of recording, Anna Valen's had her Patreon taken away from her. It's a wild choice to strip away the Patreon from the one person actively saying that you're one of the better places for relatively safe adult content, but go off, I suppose. If you would like to support her, which you definitely should, you can go to her Subscribestar, link in the description. Again, I know I've said it like 8 times this episode, but please support small creators and especially trans women who are taking the brunt of this shit. Well, that was the show for this week. I don't really have a ton else. You can find the schedule here. We're doing Bakano tonight, which is... look, it's an anime from the same studio that made Durarara before they made Durarara that I personally really like, and I need something good this week. If you want to join the Discord, it's in the description below, as with all my other stuff. I'll be playing Tarkov tomorrow because I just need something to zone out, and yeah, so I'll be playing Tarkov tomorrow night at 4 p.m. MST. We'll be doing more Pokemon Legends ZA at noon on Wednesday and Friday. More PvE Tarkov on Saturday night, and yeah, that's basically the thing for this week. I'm going to see about doing another pet play this week, but it's going to sort of depend. The big thing that I'm aware of off the top of my head for news is just the Rockstar union firings, and then Rockstar trying to pretend that instead of it being because they fired a bunch of union members, that instead they're delaying GTA 6 for unrelated reasons. But, yeah. Anyway, as a reminder, this and everything that I do is brought to you by viewers and readers like you. You can find everything that I do over at fen.gay. Again, also just check the description for all of the places that I exist. And yeah, thank you very much to April, Fragile Paper, Manfred, Pinball Witch, Pimento, Yalk, and Rose for supporting the stream and video and just everything that I do over on patreon.com/fen and coffee.com/fen. I couldn't do this without all of your support. So thank you all so very much. Have a good day, night, whatever time zone it is for you all. Bye.